Okay, hello everybody. My name is Chris Shivets, and in BCC I'm Business Development Manager responsible for financials, analytics and planning, and also for everything about SAP HANA. And this way I'll tell you today about SAP HANA Live reporting and SAP HANA Simple Finance. Let's start. I'll start with a little introduction to SAP HANA platform usage options, how we can use SAP HANA and what are the benefits of different usage options. Then I'll switch to SAP HANA Live reporting. I'll tell what SAP HANA Live is and what are the components of SAP HANA Live and show how we can use it. Then I'll tell you about the main component of S/4HANA about Simple Finance. We'll go into details what Simple Finance is, what are parts of Simple Finance, and how we can benefit from introducing Simple Finance. And last but not least, the summary will sum up a bit what we have talked about. Okay, let's start SAP HANA platform. As you probably know, the main part of SAP HANA is the database. It's not the normal database, as all its data is stored in the memory, but it's not the only difference from other databases. It offers also the column tables as opposite to row tables, and the column tables are much quicker for analytics, but in HANA they are also quicker for transactions. So if you have a transaction system, for example, ERP on HANA, all the fact tables will be kept as column tables. Therefore, they will be easy to write in, but also very powerful to read the data with reading the data. And SAP HANA Database has something additional. These are views, but not only the normal views like in any other database, but views that you can create graphically in HANA Studio, views, so-called analytic views, the simple but very performant views, and the more complex calculation views where SQL language is used or embedded C functions that are also very powerful but a bit slower. Okay, that's it. The SAP HANA Database, it's the main component of HANA Platform, but HANA Platform is more than just the database. In fact, it starts with the tools for data acquisition. So these are two tools that are offered in the SAP HANA Platform license. This is a real-time data replication server used to replicate tables from any database or SAP system to SAP HANA, and also business object data services, very powerful LTE tool used for loading, transaction, and extraction, ETL tool that you probably know from your SAP architecture, SAP architecture. Okay, and in the database inside there are also the calculation and planning engines that also make it possible to force database to make complex statistical calculations or some planning functions inside the database, so much more quicker than if that would have been done on the application server level. And there are as well the tools to access the database, to manage the database, SAP HANA Studio, the main tool, and SAP HANA Information Composer, a simple tool for business users. Okay. If we have SAP HANA, we can use it in various ways. The first way is to use SAP HANA as an analytical data warehouse. So we copy data from, replicate from any database system or from any SAP system. Can do it in real time or with ETL transforming to HANA, and then we can process it within HANA with Business Object Data Services tool and report it from HANA with the use of analytical calculation views with some external reporting tools like business objects, for example. The other use for SAP HANA is just the use as the database for applications. This can be SAP applications like ERP, CRM, SCM, or BW, but also for some other user applications where SAP HANA plays as a database. When SAP HANA is used as a database, then we profit from better reading performance, especially important, which is especially important for analytics, and sometimes the speeding up of reading transactions, of reading data is up to 1,000 times as comparing to standard database. Better transaction response or execution time is also observed when using HANA as a data warehouse or database. Modeling environment for analytics and calculation view creation in HANA Studio is very nice and user-friendly for the end user, for the HANA administrators to create HANA views that connect several tables together. The embedded planning and statistical libraries, the so-called statistical library language, are very useful for planning and statistical purposes. As I said, the ETL tools are very powerful and are sold in the package with HANA packages, and HANA supports Hadoop processing and big data storage. If we have business suites, SAP HANA system on HANA, then we have also better transaction response, execution time. We have several new transactions. We have new possibilities to switch on new functionalities such as SAP Accounting powered by SAP HANA, SAP Cash Management. I will tell about this later. We can resign of secondary indices. There are no anymore cluster or pool tables. We have the possibility to work with in real time with the transactions that had to be called in the background before because they took so much time to execute. And we have more than 500 reports that optimized for SAP HANA standard reports and that make it possible to report on very quickly. And in fact, one can report on the line item level in SAP on HANA, and it will work very performant. There are also more than 1,000 now SAP HANA views. There's a so-called SAP HANA Live solution. I'll tell you about this a bit later. Okay, what is this SAP HANA Live reporting and what are its main benefits and drawbacks? When we have a standard SAP system, let's say ERP system and BW system, we have various bottlenecks. The transaction processing is sometimes not as performant as we would like it to be. Then the data extraction is not online. It's usually once during the night or sometimes several times a day, but it's not real time. And sometimes we have problems even with calling the reports in BW system, especially for large data sets. Users wait several minutes for their reports to be ready. What we can do about it? The first thing, and the easiest, perhaps, is to migrate to HANA. If we migrate these two systems, BW and ERP, to SAP HANA solution, then we can process transaction with better performance, and the performance of our analysis is outstanding. In fact, it can quicken up by sometimes by 100, 1000 times, so the users don't need anymore to wait for the data. But still we have a gap here. The data extraction, although it's quicker on SAP HANA system, it's not real time, so the users of analytics system have to wait for the data to become ready for reporting. And if this is the problem, we can use SAP HANA Live. SAP HANA Live is the solution to report directly from the business suite system, so ERP, CRM, or SCM system. Both operational data and strategic data can be reported this way. Usually when we have BW system, there are a lot of reports already prepared, so we don't resign of it when introducing SAP HANA Live. But SAP HANA Live can take much of reports that till now were prepared in BW system. As SAP sees it, when SAP HANA Live SAP HANA comes as database, the system changes. It changes so much that in one system we can have several applications together on SAP HANA. So ERP and SCM and data warehouse, for example, can be installed on one SAP system, just SCM, data warehouse and ERP as add-ons for the system. And we can report from these centralized systems with computer and mobile devices with new tools. Okay. Perhaps most of you know what BI content is. It's the predefined repository of reporting elements that facilitate the implementation of BW. These are predefined extractors, transformations, info object, data providers, queries, and even authorizations in BW system that can be used usually a bit changed for the user, but they make implementation of SAP BW much quicker and easier and simpler, because the consultant doesn't have to know all the dependencies between SAP tables. He just uses extractors that give predefined business areas to be consumed by BW. And similar it is with SAP HANA Live. This is the business logic repository, but this time it lies on the database level, so below the business suite. These are predefined views, database analytic views, in fact calculation views, a bit more complex, that can be used for strategic and operational reporting. And also SAP HANA Lives, these are not only the views but also some additional tools. So what SAP HANA Live really is? If we have SAP HANA under our business suite system, let's say ERP system, then we have tables. We could report on these tables with any reporting tools that can connect to SQL, for example, business object, but the dependencies between SAP tables are sometimes very, very complex. And to report, for example, financials in SAP, one needs, I don't know, 30 tables together to get the financials area, to get the data from the general ledger, for example. And there are a lot of exceptions when the connections between tables should be done a bit differently. So sometimes even programming is needed, and SQL is not enough to join the tables together. So to avoid this burden, SAP gives SAP HANA Live views. They connect several tables together and present it as business views. Sometimes the several business views are connected together in a bigger business view, and this can be consumed by reporting tools. But SAP HANA Live, it's not only these calculations views shown here. These are also some other tools that facilitate using these views. So one of them, and a very important one, is SAP HANA Live Explorer. It facilitates browsing, finding the right view for reporting for the business user. Another tool of SAP HANA Live is the Extension Assistant. It's a quite new tool for SAP HANA SPS 9 that makes extending standard SAP HANA Live views for business user easier. So if you want to add some fields, for example, Z fields from these tables to SAP HANA views, the extension assistants can make it quite easy. And SAP HANA Live Authorization Assistant is a tool to help create authorization on the database level more easily on the base of existing ABAP authorization. Because if you report with SAP HANA Live, you have to connect directly to SAP HANA Database. That means you have to create the user authorization on the database level, not on the business suite user level. So this is a bit more complex, but you have also tools that can make it a bit more easier. What is SAP HANA Live Browser? SAP HANA Live Browser, as I said, facilitates finding the right view, but it can also facilitate looking into data. So here these are some areas when the view are and one view is taken into account and its fields are shown, but the user can also see the dependencies between views and which tables are taken into account in each view, or even view some data within the SAP HANA Live browser. Let's try to show a live SAP HANA browser. So I have perhaps I'll open the definition of new general ledger account balance query. It's a view from general ledger accounting that presents summarized data from general ledger. I can see the definition of the fields here. I can also see what subviews are used here, and these subviews are defined out of subviews as well, and so on and so on. And at the end there are tables, so you see how many tables, perhaps it's even not visible because there are too many of them, is connected within one view that's presented to the user at the end. New general ledger account balance query. Okay, we can select the view here that we would like to use in reporting. As I said, we could report even here with right click, just after opening the definition, just seeing the data. But we can make a jump from here also to, we could open the contents, so see the data, but we can also jump to SAP Lumira, one of the SAP Business Object tools, or to Excel-based tools, analytics for Office, to browse the data. So I'm just connected to the data with Lumira. To financial data. I have some measures here. Let's say accumulated balance. It will be interesting for me. Let's divide it by the general ledger account name. We can see it graphically in various ways. We could also see it as a table, add some additional data here, and we are reporting directly on SAP ERP data in real time with SAP Lumira. In this example, we could also do the same with the Excel-based tool, SAP Analysis for Office, just using SAP HANA Live. SAP HANA Live is a very powerful tool that enables very quick access to SAP data. In fact, just after installing, we could use it if it wasn't for the authorization, but because we usually cannot give the whole authorization to the SAP ERP or CRM data. Okay, but the SAP gives 1,000 views, but not all views are really to be used by the users. In fact, there are so-called private views. These are created by SAP and are used within others use given with SAP HANA Live, but they can be changed by SAP in any moment, so in fact they shouldn't be used by the user. There are so-called reuse views created by SAP that may be used by the users to create, for example, other client-based views. There are some query views. Query views are ready for reporting. They usually have some prompts that will be asked at the beginning. The views I have chosen, the view I have chosen here was just the query views. In the name, it has the query addition. That meant that it will have prompt for reporting ready. And usually the user builds its own customers views, usually starting with copying the SAP given query or reuse views and then adjusting them to the user needs. For example, by adding some Z fields or some other tables by joins and so on. Okay, if the user is not happy with only using the views given by SAP but wants to adjust them, the most powerful tool is SAP HANA Studio. SAP HANA Studio allows creating new or copying SAP and extending views, subviews and extending them. Perhaps I'll show SAP HANA Studio as well. So I will have access to several SAP SAP HANA databases. I'll choose one of them. And when you install SAP HANA Live on your SAP HANA system, then you will have here in the content SAP HBA ECC content. This is for ERP system. And as you see here, we have more than 1,000 calculations view. And here, as opposed to SAP HANA browser, they are just put into alphabetical order. So it's better to preview and select the views in the browser, and then if you want to use some of them, choose it here. Either to check how it is defined. If I double click here, I have the views open here and I can check its definition. Or I could copy any views here to my, let's say, BCC area to prepare my own view that perhaps has some additional data. As you see, it's a graphical tool. This is controlling CO overhead management area defined for the user that joins the cost center, order, internal order, and WBS elements together, and allows reporting on these three areas together. And in SAP HANA Studio, you could also preview the results, preview the data. These are posted dates. So let's So I am just previewing this data. I'm checking whether I have done this modeling correctly. The system just generated the data, and I'm browsing the live data. Let's say okay, I have chosen the cost center. The system, I can see it's not very performant. and no rows retrieved. So perhaps I had given some wrong entry parameters, for example, valuation type in cost controlling, so no rows in retrieved, although in the database there are a lot of them. Okay, let's leave it. So, if you have done this, you can use the standard calculation views furnished with SAP HANA Live, but you can as well create your own ones. And with a lot of business object tools, you could consume this SAP HANA Live views directly. With one that is very important, unfortunately not yet. Web intelligence needs the universe to define the report on. So in fact, you have to make the intermediate layer with information design tool. It has some advantages and drawbacks. The advantage here would be that you put here the fields into dimensions, and that it's very easier to comprehend by the end user. So, so perhaps that's the advantage. But the disadvantage is that it's a bit more work. But the universe created here on top of SAP HANA views can be reused by this tool as well. So sometimes it's a good idea to create universes so that the user could use also this web intelligence, quite powerful self-service tool. Okay. So as for SAP HANA, and perhaps I'll just add that SAP HANA Live reporting is quite powerful and it acts quite good, but it's better to have the newest SAP HANA service pack. SPS 8 or even 9 is better to be able to govern to be able to limit the amount of memory used by a SAP HANA Live user, because whatever the performance of SAP HANA is, it can be at the end consumed by the user if he thinks out very complex areas that require many join on database that are that could be possibly not too performant. So it's very as the user reports directly on SAP database level, it's very important to set the limits for the user and for process in SAP HANA, especially when this is SAP HANA where, for example, ERP systems run on. So, as I said, you need SAP HANA with SPS 8 or even better 9 to be able to set such limits to be on the safe side. Okay, let's move to Simple Finance, the main part of S/4HANA. I'll tell you what Simple Finance is, what S/4HANA is, and try to make a closer look at its components. S/4HANA, it's highly advertised by SAP now. What is it? In fact, S/4HANA, it's a SAP that based on HANA Database. It needs database as it is, and some functionalities of S/4HANA can only be used with HANA Database. S/4HANA is specially programmed for HANA, so it cannot run on database, another database. A very important part of S/4HANA are these SAP HANA Live views. These are not only SAP HANA Live views for reporting, but also SAP HANA Live views for other things I'll tell you about in a moment. I would say the most important part of S/4HANA is SAP Simple Finance now, as the other part, SAP Simple Logistics, is not released yet for the user and should be released till the end of 2015. What is SAP Simple Finance? It means this is simplified internal construction of financials in SAP. The table model beneath SAP Financials is changed, and therefore the customizing, operation, maintenance, and reporting is simplified. The system can have smaller size, and the processing can be even faster, and reporting as well. On the top of this, SAP gives SAP Fiori as an add-on to the ABAP NetWeaver environment, and special application SAP Fiori for Simple Finance that allow to make transactions not in SAP GUI user interface, but with a very nice HTML5 interface. As SAP Fiori for Simple Finance are the transactional applications, there is also a different set called SAP Smart Business for Simple Finance. There is a set of analytical apps showing the most important key performance indicators. And the last but not least, the new licensing model is also part of S/4HANA. That means that all clients would most probably will have to pay additionally for the transition to S/4HANA. Perhaps some early adopters will be excluded from the fee. SAP Simple Financials is based on three parts. It's SAP Accounting powered by SAP HANA, SAP Cash Management powered by SAP HANA, and Integrated Business Planning. The most important part is this, SAP Accounting powered by SAP HANA. As I said, it's the total change within SAP internal tables in controlling and financials, but also in the from a user perspective, that changes a lot. So there is after the transition to Simple Finance, there is only one simple source of truth. There is no data duplication between, for example, CO and FI. Between summarization level and line item level, as in the new table architecture, there is one table, one that rules them all, I would say, the universal journal. It stores the data from controlling, general ledger, asset accounting, material ledger on line item level. And the old tables are just created as views, so they don't store any data and just are recreated on the fly when the data is needed in order to preserve backward compatibility. For example, if you have your own Z program that reads something from the old tables, it will work after the universal journal transition. Most probably, because it will read data from the views instead of tables. The system will, on the application server, will not see much difference between this. But the In fact, the data will be stored in one table instead of several tables, as it is in classic financials in SAP. So reporting will be even even better. As I said, you can force with SAP HANA Live, you can find the limit of SAP HANA if you prepare very complex calculations views in SAP HANA Studio. But when you have universal journal, the links between tables are much simpler. You have all the data, all the financial data within one table, and you need only additional master data tables to connect to this data to be able to report on. So you need not the complex calculation view, but the very performant analytical view in SAP HANA that can make reporting even better. The database shrinks because the data is not redundant anymore, so the database can shrink from such a transition to simply accounting powered by SAP HANA as well. The transactions are quicker, so when you save the financial document, it has to save the data only in one table instead of the line item table, the summary table, the controlling tables, the material ledger tables, the indexes tables. So in fact, instead of several updates, one update on the universal journal is needed, so the transactions are quicker. But some transactions are changed or used other new transactions instead of them. So for example, the cost element known in CO are disappearing. Instead of this, there's an additional attribute of general account that sets the type of the general account. So you have some changes with such a transition, but there's a lot of tools that simplify the change, that allow to migrate the data from the old structures, from the old configuration, customizing, and also the user authorization. The second part of SAP Finance is the cash management powered by SAP HANA. It's the new parts such as bank account management. If you have a lot of bank accounts, it can facilitate management of these accounts. Cash operation, and it's so completely new, and liquidity management is much simplified. Liquidity management was in standard SAP was partly in BW, partly in ERP system. Now, as the planning is moved to ERP system, it's one simplified tool for liquidity management. I'll show you. Here you can see the planning of liquidity planning screen, for example. And as I said, planning is integrated with SAP NetWeaver. Some time ago, SAP issued his new business planning and consolidation tool, BPC 10.1, and SAP integrated into C4HANA. You can use web or Excel-based application to plan, whereas you can access within this application the actual data from SAP as it is integrated into NetWeaver on SAP data, and planning data as well. You have a lot of predefined templates for planning and reports, but this planning is different for each company. If you want to make a real complex planning, you'll have to create your own templates and reports and adjust the SAP a given planning templates and layouts to your own needs. Okay, as I said, one of things that's furnished with SAP S/4HANA and SAP Simple Financials are SAP Fiori application for Simple Finance. And these are transactional apps. There are a lot of them. And let's try to use some of them. Let's wait a moment. I will just find the link. Okay. Okay, I connected to the trial version of S/4HANA, and I can see here the SAP Fiori for Financials tiles. Let's see, perhaps account receivables. I'll focus on one company code. I can see here the debits and credits for my receivables. I can compare them to last year. And if I'm interested into details, I can just jump in. And see them by the customer and line items. I can see information about customer, process this receivables, jump into other transactions from here, display the document itself, and so on. So it's quite a powerful tool, not only for viewing the data, but also for, as we see here, for processing transactions. And here you have only some of the applications furnished by SAP with S/4HANA. You could also make, for example, check our cash position today. We have quite a lot of money. Let's see it by the bank. Okay, we have Citibank has a lot of our money. Perhaps you would like to make a bank transfer. For the amount of 500,000 US dollar from Bank of America to Citibank, perhaps. Yes, make the bank transfer. and 500,000 US dollars is transferred from Bank 1 to Bank 2, from Bank of America to Citibank, and I could see it in my bank transfers, in the approved transfers. It could be approved by other person as well. Fortunately, it's not sent to the bank. Okay, so as you see, SAP gives a lot of applications to make the accessing SAP systems even more user-friendly than before. And there is a lot of such applications. They are very easy to adjust to user needs. And as I said, these transactional applications are not all that SAP gives with SAP Finance. Also, smart business applications are just analytical applications, just showing KPIs and having reports beneath. If you double click on such application, there are a lot of them in Simple Finance 2.0. There is quite a lot of them, but ready to be used. So it's very easy just to pick them and to create a managerial cockpit out of them directly. So, as everybody would like to have Simple Finance now, how to migrate to Simple Finance? To have the whole functionality of Simple Finance, you need to migrate to the new general ledger functionality, but you don't need to do it at first. If you already have new general ledger functionality, then at each period end, you can migrate to general ledger in Simple Finance with whole functionality of Simple Finance. But if you are on classic general ledger, then it's advised first to migrate to general ledger in Simple Finance, and then at the fiscal year end to add the split functionality, for example, in Simple Finance general ledger, as it is easier with the tools furnished with the Simple Finance than in the old tools for transferring to new general ledgers. But if you have a classic general ledger, then these two projects should be separated, as this is a more technical project and this would be a bit business project, and it's always better to separate projects into parts so that the project was successful at the end. Okay, so what are the migration steps you would have to do to migrate? In fact, there are a lot of them. There are some preparatory steps that should be done at the beginning. Of course, there are some basic steps, just adding this Simple Finance add-on to our system. And there's a lot of data migration steps. So in order to have all the data on the transaction financials data at the end in this universal journal at the end. So you have to make a lot of migration steps, but these steps are very well done into the customizing menu and very well prepared by SAP. I would say much better than the transition to new general ledger in the older SAP versions. And of course, you need to make such migration first on your development system, then on the test system, and after all on your production system. And you can expect as well some production system downtime during the migration. It's inevitable. But to sum up, you have a lot of gains here. Of course, you have a lot of less data in your system, in financials. The SAP transactions are usually from 3 to 7 times faster, and both writing and reading in financials is much easier. The customizing is also simpler, as there is no need to customize separate something in CO, in FI, and in material ledger and so on. It's all one area. There are also some test data that can be used when testing the Simple Financials, as the database is smaller, the database maintenance is simpler, and also, as I said, the online reporting or using SAP HANA Live views. These are special SAP HANA Live views for the SAP Universal Journal, are much quicker than using calculation views on SAP just migrated to SAP HANA Database. And the SAP Fiori transaction and smart business analytics app for Simple Finance, giving more powerful tool for the end user, especially for the managers, to access SAP transactions to benefit from it. I'm giving you some useful links here as well at the end. You'll get the presentation. It will be possible to access on our website. The most important is this one, the documentation of Simple Finance 2.0, and this S/4HANA trial. You can use it to try this Fiori applications on S/4HANA. And to sum up, invite you to learn more about BCC. We have a lot of experience with HANA, with HANA Migration projects, HANA Live reporting projects, platform hosting. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Goodbye.